It seems to me that we are live already.
Yes, but I have just been told. Great. So let's go. So good day, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the region of the world in which you are. My name is Cassandra Fernandez. I'm the chair of the Institute of Entertainment and Sport of the very cool Berkeley Global Society, which is a nonprofit educational network of legal professionals who received all or part of their legal education at the University of California, Berkeley. And BGS is an international organization which has a direct presence in 96 countries. And I believe that today as well, we are present in many of those countries across the world. And the basic purpose of BGS is to unlock intelligence and human capital, which we really hope to do today on a very, very interesting topic. I am also the legal and project manager at GLMS, which is the Global Lottery Monitoring System, which is a nonprofit organization that facilitates the work of lotteries worldwide in sport integrity. And just like me, you will hear from a lot of very interesting panelists and moderators who work in the world of sport, who are starting to tackle this very interesting area of esports. So with this Institute of Entertainment and Sport, together with the support of one of our other very prestigious institutes, the Institute of Arbitration, we are launching the Esports series as of today. We already have initial dates, which is today, tomorrow, and the 10th of June. So save those in your agendas if you haven't already. And so here goes. So esports, what is it? It is the playing and, just as importantly, the watching of competitive video games. And its fundamentals may or may not be similar to traditional sports, with skilled players competing against each other. Especially during COVID last year, you might have seen it on your television screens or in bars and other social places that you might have gone to pre-COVID even. I certainly did see them in the last couple of years increasingly on the television. And there is a lot of media buzz around it now, but it's not a new phenomenon. And especially in today's session, you're going to hear a lot, have an introduction, a sort of crash course, speaking to some fantastic, listening to some fantastic people here on our panel today. Followed then by tomorrow, a panel on the organization of esports. There are many ways to organize esports by different types of entities, and we're going to discuss that with another very interesting panel of speakers tomorrow. So I would like to introduce you to our moderator for today, who will then talk to you more about the panelists and the panel. So today we have another alumnus of BGS, Christoph Kauffmann, who is a lawyer counsel with Osborne Clarke disputes team in Cologne in Germany. And he advises and represents clients in litigation and arbitration proceedings, focusing on the energy, transport, and automotive and tech, media, and comms sector. So he has a lot of background and experience. And well, I know him as an arbitration expert, so I'm really looking forward to some interesting discussions with him. And I would like to leave you the floor, Chris, while also thanking our partners of this series, which are already our integrity partner is the CSCF Foundation for Sport Integrity, and one of our other favorite partners of the series, which is GLMS. So as I said, these are the first 3 events, today, tomorrow, and the 10th of June, always at the same time. And hopefully we'll be having a few more later this year, so do keep a lookout for them. With that said, I wish you all a fantastic panel. Thank you to the organization team behind the scenes who you don't see today. Thank you to the BGS President, Oban Lapos. And I leave you the floor. Chris, have a great panel.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today, and welcome to the world of esports. I always wanted to say that with a lower voice. Thanks for the introduction, Cassandra. Thanks to BGS for giving me the chance to speak about or speak to these interesting panelists here today. Yeah, as Cassandra said, esports has become a billion-dollar industry with growing numbers, and the annual. When I wrote that the annual salaries go up to $7 million US, I was shocked and surprised, to be honest. That's a lot of money. And besides these numbers, I think there are a lot of legal and also social implications or questions that can come out of that. And the idea of this and goal of this panel today is to give our audience an introduction to esports law. What is esports? Who are the main stakeholders? What legal issues are there? And then we also want to talk about some moral, ethical, and maybe questions for the players or the players' life. We have quite a straightforward approach today. It's a panel discussion, and we will not share any PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. So we will just have an open discussion, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our speakers. Gaylor, I'll start with you. Gaylor RABU. So you're a senior lecturer at the Aix-Marseille University in France, where you're the director of the Center for Sports and for Sports Law, where you're teaching academic law, sports law, as well as, of course, esports law. You published several handbooks and articles on these topics, and yeah, you're the real legal specialist today for esports.
Thank you.
Coming to you, Khalid. Khalid Naili, you are a former esports champion in fighting games. I remember when we got to know each other, we talked a lot about the fighting games. Interesting topic. And you're working in the esports competition field or are involved in esports since 2002 with over 100 top 3 placements in international tournaments. You're also an advisor to the MDJS, the American des Jeux et des Sports. I have to work on my French, but maybe you can explain later what that means.
It's fine.
And you're also the CEO on various esports and sports matters or companies, correct? We have to tell our audience that we are not sure if our third speaker or panelist can join today, Arun Mishra, because he has some private issues that he has to resolve, and that came up on short notice. And we hope that his family is safe and he can join us maybe a bit later today. So, shall we start?
Yeah.
My first question, what is esports? Who wants to go first? Naili, do you want to shoot?
Okay, I'll try. So sports stands for electronic sports. It's easier to explain it as competition on video games, because this is what it is about. And the name esports is a way to make it easier for everyone to understand that the kind of competition might be ruled and organized like regular sports, either in terms of how the competition behave, but also around everything that goes around the industry of sports, meaning broadcasting, sponsoring, professional players, and everything around. So it's really like a competition on video games, but behaving like regular sports competition. This is how I could put it very simply.
Gaylor, do you want to add something?
Yeah, to complete. On 7 October 2016, the French Parliament adopted a special law, the law for a digital republic, as it was entitled. And in this law, we have a legal definition of what esport is from a French perspective, of course. But the definition is quite interesting. So according to to the article, which now is in the Homeland Security Code. Maybe I will explain why further. A video game competition is defined as pitting 2 or more players or team players against each other for a score or a win. Only that, which is quite similar from, if I understand well, of what Khalid said before. And what is interesting in this legal definition, first, it's a legal definition, which of course legal consequences, but above all, I think there is quite wild in the sense that esports competition doesn't mean only that two teams or 2 players are going to confront each other, but you can also simulate esports competition on video games like Just Dance, for example, where players are trying to do the best choreography as they can, and you assess them as their skills, how did they express their skills to repeat the choreography. It's not a direct confrontation, direct opposition between teams or between players. Yeah. So the scope is wider as we thought before.
Interesting. And are there any ideas to change that? To change the law in France? Because as you said, I mean, it might make sense to include such games as dancing or where you just,
yeah, but I think that the definitions can include those games.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So that's your interpretation of the definition.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
From my point of view.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. But would it include activities around social games or serious games? Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't think. I do not know what Khalid think about social games or serious games.
Well, it's just about the definition of what we can call a video game. The thing is that there are 2 ways to handle the esports question as a definition, because there are a party that just want to put esports to actually deals with everything about video games. So if you go to that philosophy, you're going to add anything that implies that you're playing an electronic game, actually. So maybe the social games goes in because it's like a video game. But there, in the other hand, there's another like school that tries to actually put more limits to the esports definition by adding other matters than just the technological way to compete. Is it a fair game? Is it a balanced game? Is it about competition? Are there any random factors getting in? So, depending on what you want to do with it, the esports definition can be larger or shorter. And I will give you an example. Well, this is very, very recent. Actually, it's from yesterday. Here in Morocco, we decided to have our own esports federation. And we couldn't call it the Esports Federation, actually, because esports doesn't have a real legal definition here. So for, I will say, a lot of reasons, they decided to stand for the Federation of Electronic Games. And because you could put esport in that and other matters, but you're sure that you will not miss anything regarding sports. So the meaning of sports, as you said, maybe in France there's a legal definition, but in other countries they're not, and a lot of people are not familiar with esports. I think that's why we're having this webinar today. And so depending on what you seek, you can add things or remove things from the esports definition.
Yeah, no, from a law perspective, Gaylor, I think it makes sense to have a definition, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a question, very interesting question in the chat. A person asked if under the French law it includes or not offline esports. Well, the French legislator doesn't make difference between online or offline, even if the legal regime this distinction has consequences of what you can do, if you can organize a paid competition, if minors can participate, are allowed to participate to those competitions. This could be this could have consequences, legal consequences, but not in the definition strictly.
So there's no strict wording that requires it to be online.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, interesting.
I will even add something. There are actually ideas depending on the kind of game, of course, but and I think we're gonna cover this subject later.
Yeah.
But about for integrity, there's a lot of people around the esports area that wanna focus esports on actual offline physical competition, because it's one of the only way to guarantee integrity in some cases. So that's why esports covers everything, but I think the approach, depending on if it's online or offline, might be different depending on what you wanna do. So for integrity reason, maybe we'll talk about that later. Online is a very, very different world than offline physical competition.
Yeah, it brings along a few more problems, I would say, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know what you think about it, Khalid, but if you see games like Pokemon Go, which includes augmented reality, if you think about virtual reality, and maybe tomorrow the crossing of these two kind of games, the distinction of what we will talk about further between sports and esports won't have sense, won't still have any sense.
I completely agree. You know, we see in sci-fi movies, you know, when they show the future, we see like that the players are going into video game players are going into a kind of augmented reality, virtual reality, that they're actually doing everything that is happening on the game, you know, moving, jumping, and things like that. We're not that far from that future, but at the moment you're involved with real physical actions, technology is just here to support the competition. So yeah, the limit between sport and esports is getting thinner, because other sports, they do include technology. I think in a football, soccer game, you have technology, you have bots following the players to get the data, you have the video recording for arbitrations and things like that. So I think the difference get thinner the more you get maybe more physical, and the part of the technology getting, you know, reduced. But yeah, that's a very interesting topic, and maybe, and you know, well, maybe in the future we won't make any distinction between them. Like, think about chess.
That's me. I can talk about chess.
That's your thing. I know. That's why I brought that topic. But think about chess. It's competition. Is it sport? But it's treated like an Olympic sport. You know. So.
And in France, it's considered as a sport.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we count chess as a sport, why video games are not? I mean, chess you play on a physical board, and video game is just a technological board. But in the end, you have two players facing each other into a competition.
If I add to it, it's interesting to see how countries will react and adapt to the world of esports, right? So how esports friendly is the country. I think that will be a question that will also define where you have maybe the biggest tournaments and yeah, even though it's online or maybe online. Okay, then let's come back to not so experienced esports persons like me and talk. Give us a quick introduction to the games that are kind of famous. What games are there? What kind of games are we talking about? What kind of tournaments are we talking about? Are we talking about online tournaments, or what is the most common thing?
Well, if I can try to make a quick description, just some history. Esports actually, as we heard about it, started with PC gaming. So it's very important to understand that video game stands for a very, very big industry, but there are actually a lot of different ways to play the games. So in the industry, you can maybe have three big like categories. That is console gaming, PC gaming, and mobile gaming. They're all about video games, but the way you consume them, the way you approach them as a market, and the requirement needed for each game are different, but also the player's profile is different, the cultural approach is different, and the impact of each category of video games can be different depending on the region of the world you're talking about. A long time ago, it disappeared. They were a fourth category, but they were no mobile games. We talked about arcade games, and it's important to understand that arcade games existed because they are maybe the beginning of what we have on esports. So today, the PC gaming esports is maybe the most famous in the Western world, I want to say, because it was promoted from the beginning by huge companies. So actually, there is a strategy game called StarCraft that is a PC game. Well, it got released on consoles, but it wasn't big on consoles. It was mainly a PC game. And actually, one of the heads of Samsung in Korea was a big StarCraft player. And he decided by himself to have his company supporting competition on that. And this is what began like the rise of what we call esports today, because they put actually money to sponsor the competition and to give them a larger appeal in terms of broadcasting, in terms of players' professionalization, I think. So because it was targeted toward PC gaming, we had a lot of big esports games that are on that category. So the most famous ones are League of Legends, Dota 2, which are the same kind of game. It's like strategy game where 5 players, they have to face 5 other players to defend their territory and fight against each other. So it's team game. You have another PC game which is that is different. It's called Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which is a first-person shooter. It's also a team game where players they face each other. 2 teams face each other in a 3D arena when they have to get a maximum of points by killing the opponent or getting a flag or something like that. You have other games that stands within the same maybe category, like Rainbow Six Siege, which is the same kind of mechanics of a Counter-Strike, but for different rules, different engine, different behavior. So this stands for the major and most famous PC-only esports game. Then we have the console gaming, and for console gaming, esports are kind of different because you don't play the same games. Most are sports-related games, so it's very easy to get them when you're into sports because it's virtual sports. So some people think that esports are only about those virtual sports into video games, but not only. So you have games like FIFA, which is like the official FIFA video game, like a football game. And you have other sports game, you have racing games also that can go into that category. And you have another game that is also on PC and console that is called Rocket League. It's actually the fusion of FIFA and racing games. You actually drive a car and you have to score a goal with a giant ball. It sounds weird, yeah, but actually it's a huge and very, very popular esport game. And if you ask me, maybe it's the most esports game that got released. Also,
why do you think that?
Okay, you're opening a dangerous topic to explain. So in most of the esports games, you have to choose a character or a team or a car or something that will have different behavior, different powers and weaknesses. And it's all about using wisely the tools your character or car or team has. So some people will say that it's never balanced because depending on the character you have, you may have an edge on something or not. Well, that's just a point of view. Because some people say in chess, you play the same, you have the same tools, but in reality not, because white and black, they don't play, one of them play first. So it's not completely balanced, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Rocket League, actually, what you can choose the car you want. There's nothing changes. Both players, they do actually have the exact same chances. It's all about their skill. There's no random factor, no specific characteristic factor. So you're both in the same condition and you have to win. And that's why some people say like it's most sports, because even in a football game like FIFA, depending on the team you choose, there's a difference. But of course you can play both the same team. But in FIFA, there are some kind of random factor behaviors called script that allows the game for more realistic behavior to sometimes have some random things. Sometimes the ball would just not go the same way as you predicted to add that. So it's a part of the game, and the professional players, they handle that. They know about it, so they handle that. But, you know, since they're random factors, outside factors, maybe it's not very, very fair and balanced for competition, depending on the point of view. Where Rocket League is completely fair. You both have exactly the same chances to win. And that brought me to another kind of game, which I'm from. It's what we call fighting games. It's about two players facing each other with the specific characters that have an amongst set of tools to win. And the winner will be the player that deals most damage to the other. So this, and that's why I talked about arcades before, started actually in the arcades. So what we call arcades, they were some time ago for dinosaurs like me. Actually, you could play video games not only at home, but you can go to places where you can put a coin in a machine and play various video games. And fighting games, they started in the arcades because you go there, you put a coin and you play against another player, another human player. And if you win, you're allowed to stay without putting money again. So the stronger you are and the less money you pay. And this economic balance created a very intensive competition. And it has its own competition, I think, way before we heard about esports. But because of the development of esports and the opportunities it created, fighting games merged with the overall esports we know. And finally, we have the mobile games that actually has their own games, but most of them are PC or console games adapted to the mobile support. And they have their own, because of accessibility and controls, some games works better than others. And well, most of the popular games on mobile might be shooting games. And last but not least, you're gonna ask about, but you didn't talk about Fortnite, which is the most maybe famous, like maybe everybody here heard about Fortnite. Fortnite is a game where a player is launched in an island and has to survive to be the last one among a large number of players. But the status of Fortnite as an esport or not esport game is not settled yet because of what I told before. There is a huge random factor in each Fortnite game, and it's very difficult to deal with it as a competitive competition place. But it's just a point of view, and some says it's esports, some say it's not. It's something else, and I think that's all.
We have a couple of questions. So I think the first one, and we'll first of all, Gaylor, you want to add something?
No, we can.
because
we can answer those questions.
yes, the first question is, should esports become a sport? I think that would be actually our next talking point, right? And my question is, does it have to be, Gaylor? Maybe you can. Does esport have to be a sport?
Yes, huge questions. Most of the time, people thinking, people who discover esports ask this question. It appears as the first question coming in our brain. But to answer to it, we should have we should start with a definition of sports. And from a legal perspective, we are lacking of text. The only text that I found which defines sports is the European Sports Charter, which was adopted in 1992 under the aegis of the European Council. And this treaty provides a definition of sports, but this treaty is not binding. So it's not very useful. In France, if we take in account judicial decisions and the practice of state recognition, we can find 3 criteria of definition of what is sports: physical activity, competition, and organization, and rules which can lead from the organization or the existence of competitions. Physical activity. Do we have physical activity in esports? Most people say that clicking the mouse, using the keyboard is not significant physical activity. Yes, but what is the difference between a driver in a Formula 1 machine? He's doing the same things that a player with a console. What is the difference between a chess player in France, where chess was recognized as a sport? And what about Just Dance? You're doing sports when you're playing Just Dance. Yeah. There's no difference. There's a physical activity. And it's a question of degree. How significant has to be the physical activity to be recognized as well? So it's not absolutely certain if esports answer this criteria. Do we have competitions? We have competitions. Do we have organizations? Yes, we have organizations, but not the same organizations as we have in traditional sports, with one international federation by discipline. Even if tomorrow I know you will receive Vlad Marinescu, and maybe he will have another point of view, I don't know. But the organization is not as hierarchical as it is in sports. But we have organizers, different kind of organizations. Sometimes publishers are the organizers of esports competitions.
That is actually our next point, right? Yeah, so who are the main stakeholders? Who are we talking about?
Yeah, maybe the main stakeholders are players or publisher. It depends on the point of view. From my point of view, the main protagonist. I will have a lot of enemies after that, but the main protagonist are the publishers, developers, studios, and of course publishers. Why? Because they create.
Sorry, if I may interrupt, Gaylor.
Sorry.
Who is the publisher?
Those who have the rights, the copyrights on the, video games, because they create the value, the essential value of what is used and exploited in a commercial perspective in esports. Of course, you will say, okay, you have a video game, but you cannot have an esports competition without teams on players, of course. And you can have players, you can have video games, but without the organization of competitions, you don't have esports. So maybe it's more complicated that seeing there is one stakeholders. There are many stakeholders, but I think it's my personal view that the creation of the essential value begins with publishers.
So with the game.
With the game.
What do you think, Khalid?
Well, I completely agree with what Gaylor said. The key, the start point is or are the publishers, because they hold the right of the games, and they actually decide whether you can or not hold competition on the game. They decide by making the game if it's going to be esports or not. You know, so also their marketing strategy will have an impact on if it's esports or not. Even if sometimes there are games that are not planned to be esports, that are not promoted as an esports game, but the esports community is so big that they actually make the game esports. The most famous example is with Nintendo. They have a game called Super Smash Brothers. It's actually a kind of fighting game, but Nintendo Nintendo is the publisher, so the developer publisher, they never wanted their game to be esports. They did everything to show it as a family fun party game, but the community of competitive players around that IP is so big that they had no choice to just, you know, allow them to be. They will never support it. They will never cancel events where sometimes it could happen, but they will never promote it as an esports game. But you see how actually everything is on the hands of the publisher. The other stakeholders are the players, of course, because they are the center of the competition. They are the people that plays. But I wanted to add two other stakeholders that actually play a role. First is the events organizers, because if there are no events or tournaments, there's no esports. If you just play casually with players with nothing on the stake, you know, nothing to win, no title, no ranking, nothing, you can really call it a competition. It's just one against the other playing casually. So we need organizers, even if they could be online or offline or anything, they're really important. And they also rely on the publishers and the players, because if the publishers, they don't let them do organization, they can't. And if there's no player, of course, there's no competition. And the fourth one, I mean, is the broadcaster. What you call about broadcaster is where you're gonna broadcast your competition, because esports, some of them are on TV now, but most of them, they are streamed through internet. So there are streaming platforms that actually broadcast those games. You may heard about Twitch, which is like one of the famous ones, but there's also YouTube, Facebook, and other platforms. You see also a regional platforms. If you go to Middle East, you would not see the games are not played on Twitch, for example. They have their own. In China, they also have their own. In Korea, they have their own platform. So the streaming platform, this is the place where actually all the audience gather to watch the games. If you don't broadcast the games, they do not exist. So virtually, of course, if you hold it a physical event, there are some people that actually will watch the game. But even there, they cannot go all behind the screen of the players. They actually need to see it somewhere. So all the broadcasting issues, whether it's the platform with the technical, I think it's a very important stakeholder that is vital to esports in general.
Right. To complete, of course, I totally agree with Khalid. Think about Twitch. What was Twitch before Amazon on it? Amazon paid for Twitch in 2014, if I remember well. And the asset since this day was multiplied by 10, 14. So Bezos knew before a lot of people the importance of the broadcasters in esports, and they are very important for the development of esports. And there's a huge difference between sports and esports in this concerning this topic, because you can organize easily esports competition and broadcasting them directly. It's from a technological and economic perspective, I think more easily than in sports, and you can touch everybody in the world at the same time. So you can understand the economic model you can have behind this.
If I come back to my first question, so if I ask you, does esport have to be treated as sport? Also, do you want it to be treated as sport? Or is it a different community? Because it seems to me that, you know, looking at the stakeholders, it's, I mean, it's similar, but should it be treated the same way?
Yeah, the community of fans are different. That's why, for example, football clubs or player of football clubs or players in NBA, for example, owns now esports team, because they see that video games fans, esports fans are less interested by traditional sports as the young people were interested before. So they try to catch them and to bring them from esport to go to sports with difficulties, because the communities are quite different. And to come back to your question, do esports stakeholders have interest to be assimilated to sports? In my opinion, and for the French example, I would say no, absolutely no, because sports law in France is very, very developed, and we have a typical French reflex to norm everything, and
wow.
to yeah,
talking to a German.
Yeah, okay. And it's I'm not sure that esports organizers, fans, players need a sports federation as it is ruled in France, with legislation very precise on anti-doping moves, on what teams can do, what corporate forms of companies can be, and so on. Maybe the question is, do you prefer to be free to negotiate with publishers or not? And there is another topic, very huge topic in esports, is the ownership of the esports competition. As Khalid said before, and I agree with him absolutely, the rights owns to the publisher. That the publisher can allow or not to organize a competition and to broadcast it or not. But if you apply, for example, the French sports law, the organizer has the ownership of the entertainment of the show. So you might have an opposition, a conflict between the copyrights, which owns the publishers from one side, and the right to exploit competition by the federation, the Esports Federation, which would be recognized by the states. And this conflict, this legal conflict, is too huge to be accepted in my mind.
Thank you, Gaylor. It was really interesting. I think there are a lot of legal issues coming with esports, right? It's looking at the comments and the active audience that we have. We have to talk at least a little about life of an esports player. Arun is not with us, but Khalid, you've been an esports player, quite a very professional esports player. So could you please tell us about your life and the way you trained and how can we imagine it?
Okay, so in my case, it's kind of particular because I've seen the ages of esports. So depending on the period, on the era, I want to say it was different. But for most of the time, so there are two kind of esports players. Well, maybe three, but let's just. There are casual esports player. It's like a casual sports practitioner. You want to have a football game with your friends on the neighborhood, you go do it. So you actually compete with no official, no things around you, but you just do it. But a regular sports like football enjoyer, he cannot enter an official sports like football competition. He has to be a professional to do that. The difference with esports is that most of the esports competitions are open to anyone. So the difference is not going to be inside the competition, but before. Someone who is not a professional, he will play on his free time. He will try to get better, but he will be limited by the amount of time and effort he could put in a game because he certainly has other life duties to deal with. If he's a student, if he's working, or he has a family, or things like that. The difference is that an esports player, that's his job. So he's supposed to put more time, and like in everything else, time is a key value to get better, because the more you play, the more your reaction got better, your knowledge got better, your experience got better, you know how to deal with the situation in a better way. You can face more different players. Even if you just play at home on training, you can learn more things. So time is a key value. When I was a player, I never went into full 100% being pro player. I just managed my own time to get my training time, my competition time, and my personal life and other matters time as a student or a worker. Usually it was about playing maybe 2-3 hours a day. You can either play with other people. Well, back in time, there was no online, so you actually had to gather with people, even if it was in the arcades or in places, or just practice at home situations, you do your own practice with yourself. 2-3 hours a day, and then in a weekly way, do like real sets with playing against people. We stimulate the atmosphere. So we try to put something, like pride or anything, but winning has a meaning. Because if you just play for free, you'll never get yourself into the competition mood. And then we wait for the competition time. And competition time was different because you have to play a little more before the competition. So instead of 2 or 3 hours a day, it can become 4 or 5, depending on the situation. You try to gather more with people to keep sharpening your reactions and things like that. And inside the competition, I can say, because we talk about the physical effort on esports, and I think many people forget about one thing. It's just not about sitting on a chair and having a controller, or is it a mouse or keyboard or controller. It's about how physically demanding are those competitions. Like I can tell you about one of the biggest competition in the world called Evo. It's happened every year in USA, Las Vegas. You had to start your first game at 8. There are 5,000 players entering the competition. Only one has to stay 2 days after. You have to play a lot of games. You have to stay, your reaction has to stay very, very clear. And the more you climb the competition rank, the harder, the stronger the players are, because they already won their other games. And it's really heavy in terms of physical needs. Like at the end of the day, you are dead. It's very difficult. And most of the time, the most important games are in the end of the day. You are playing from 8 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So because I've been through that, I know how physical it's important. And I know how staying in shape is key in those kind of competition. Because if you're ruined at the end of the day, you can't focus. Especially against a player that has a perfect physical shape and has this endurance, you know, to keep. So it was very huge, heavy, but for the love of the competition, we've been through that, and it's an amazing experience, for sure.
Interesting, really interesting. I think we have only 3 more minutes.
So short.
So I was wondering, I have 2 more questions coming back to what we talked about. I think it makes sense to stay with the topics we raised so far. And one question is, I think when we look at the stakeholders, the publisher has the chance to change games, right? Khalid, as you said, so if we have games like Fortnite where you see a lot of random issues, the publisher could change that and make it even an esports game. Have you seen that? Is that something that happened? Is there a demand from the community, or are there any other games, where that happened?
I will say something. Esports, well, we're more in a legal discussion, but today esports is a marketing, I want to say, tool. If you go esports, it's serious. If it's serious, it's good. You have to support it. It's not a childish game and things like that. So most of the game, they want to be esports. They want to be associated to those other games that are doing good in terms of popularity and things like that. And also, on the other hand, esports means sponsors, means more money put there, means professional players. So it's not only about the game, it's about what the players and the communities around the game, they want for their games. If they want to be esports, it's not just to be called esports, it's to actually benefit from everything that is happening around esports. And that's where the topic is. In our case, I'll talk about Morocco. We didn't solve that Fortnite case, but because we have other issues to deal with first, this question will come and we will address it the moment it happened. But the really important question is why? What does it bring if it's esports or not? If it can help players, if it can help a community to grow, if it can help to get more professional players and things like that, just by calling it esports, why not doing it? You know what I mean? So it's just about what are they looking for when they want to call a game esports or not.
Gaylor, what's your point on that?
Yes, about the change of the rules. I was thinking about one game that Khalid knows well, Street Fighter. I spoke a few years ago with professional players on Street Fighter, and the fact is, he explained me that from Street Fighter 4 to Street Fighter 5, there was a huge difference, and so with, of course, consequences on esports results. And I was thinking that in practice, it's the same thing in Formula One, where technical rules can change from a year to another in order to keep the interest on the competition. And sometimes publishers are working on it because of that, in order to get that, in order to provide sometimes another video games, even if it's under the same title. But I also wanted to say, that the difficulty for a publisher when he creates with the studios the game is that he cannot say before the launching of the game if it will succeed in the esports perspective. Maybe he will have consumers, but will it have players, pro players? Will it brings competition? He cannot know it before. And sometimes, of course, changes can create disruption in the community, and sometimes the community disappear. And it's a topic for a publisher. Because of course, in the same way that Khalid developed, esports is for publishers and the economy around it a form of exploitation, of a commercial exploitation of their video games.
Interesting. It's a really interesting topic. And my last question, because we talked about equal chances and also the way that the games work. My question is, back then I remember when I grew up, we had like private parties with computers, LAN parties where we played, for example, Quake or other games against each other, and it was always important to have a certain kind of hardware. Is that still a matter? Does it still matter what kind of hardware you're playing, and does it give you an edge? Or I think at tournaments everyone has more or less the same hardware, right?
Well, for PC gaming, it's a very specific topic because most of the times they try to provide for offline competition the same, let's say, hardware outside of the controllers, because everybody brought his own one. And maybe you have some controllers that are doing better than the other, but it's more marketing than real thing. Like if you get just something at a competitive level, most of the brands are doing the same, but everybody brags that their mouse is better. But but actually, when you play online, you play from home, so you have your own conditions to play, and hardware is a thing. Your internet network connection is a thing, so it can actually impact the quality of gaming. That's why maybe talking about same chances can, I will give you just one example. The screen you're using. There are some screens that have what we call zero input lag, meaning that the moment you push a key or something, you see it on screen. Some screens that are not professional for gaming, they have delay. So you actually see things later, so you have less time to react. So you already lost a competitive edge if you play on this kind of hardware. And that's why most of the players, they try at least to have the minimal requirements to be able to play the game as the real conditions. For fighting games, because it's my topic and I know about that, most of the controllers are the same. But actually, there is a new controller that is playing a big role this last year, that's called the Hitbox, which is actually like a keyboard, but put with big buttons on a kind of what you call arcade stick. Like for video games, console games, you have this controller to move. It can be a direction pad or a joystick. They replaced that with buttons because it's actually in hardware this is how it works. There are just directions. So when you go up forward, it's just up plus forward actually. And some players, they discovered that being able to have the buttons to move instead of the joysticks give you a response, faster moves than playing with a controller or joystick. So they're using that. Most of the professional players are actually using that. But the big question is it legal to do that? Because the games, they weren't developed to be played with that kind of tools. And so there's a huge question about that. Some players say, no, they have to ban this kind of controllers because it's not how the game is meant to be. Others says, if it works, do it. And if you complain, just bring your own. And there are this kind of issues. So yes, the hardware used can have an impact. And that's why, if you ask me, the best competitions are offline, where everybody plays with the same hardware. And back in time, on the arcade times, well, you didn't have your own controller. You had to play with on the machine. So everybody was playing with the same hardware.
Interesting. Wow, it was the hour is over, and as always, when you talk about interesting topic, it goes by like this. And I thank you very much for your time and input. It was, I think we had the idea to speak about 9 topics, right? And we were able to touch 4. So I think it shows how, how much you can talk about and how many also legal aspects are coming with the esports and the esports industry, and we haven't even talked about the relationship between a player and his team, and so thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to let the audience know that don't forget about the event tomorrow, same time, and a different panel talking about the organization of esports. And so again, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and
thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And all the best, and speak to you soon. Take care.
See you tomorrow.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.